They turned against humanity during the fight. The aftermath stunned the entire galaxy. The galaxy had always been a vast, chaotic place, but humanity had learned to navigate it. Over the years, humans had fought many battles across the stars, winning some and losing others. With time, humanity had become an important part of the galaxy, earning the trust of many species. The Xantharians, an advanced alien race, had been one of humanity's closest allies. They had provided advanced technology and support during humanity's wars against the Gorian Empire, a ruthless enemy that had tried to conquer many planets. Captain Samuel Brooks stood on the bridge of his starship, Pioneer, looking out at the stars. He was a seasoned leader, having fought in numerous space battles and led countless missions. The Pioneer was a symbol of humanity's strength and resilience. With its sleek design and powerful weaponry, the ship was one of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. Brooks, along with his crew, had spent years protecting humanity's interests, working alongside the Xantharians to keep peace in the galaxy. But today, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, something Brooks couldn't quite put his finger on. The mission had seemed simple enough. The Xantharians had asked for humanity's help in a battle against the Gorians. The Xantharians had come to trust humanity, and Brooks had agreed without hesitation. It wasn't the first time they had worked together, and the results had always been favorable. Brooks trusted his Xantharian counterparts, especially their leader, Commander Vrax, a respected and wise figure who had earned humanity's trust. But as the battle raged on over the desert planet of Zeros, things began to take an unexpected turn. The human fleet, led by Brooks and the Pioneer, had joined the Xantharian forces in defending the planet. The Gorian Empire had launched a massive assault, sending wave after wave of ships to destroy Zeros and its valuable resources. For hours, the battle had been fierce, with ships exploding in the vacuum of space and lasers streaking through the stars. As the battle continued, Brooks noticed something strange. The Xantharians, who had been fighting alongside humanity, began to pull back. Their ships, which had once fired in unison with the human fleet, now began to break formation. Brooks watched in disbelief as a Xantharian vessel, the Valkora, suddenly turned its weapons on one of the human ships, the Eagle's Shadow. The Eagle's Shadow was a smaller vessel, but it was heavily armed and had served Brooks for years. Now it was under attack by its supposed allies. "Captain, something's wrong," Lieutenant George Barnes, his communications officer, said urgently. "The Xantharians, they're turning on us." Brooks felt his heart race as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The Xantharians had always been trustworthy allies, but now they were attacking human ships. It didn't make sense. Was it a mistake? A misunderstanding? Brooks' mind raced, but he knew one thing for sure: this wasn't an accident. Red alert. "All hands to battle stations," Brooks ordered, his voice calm but firm. He quickly keyed in commands to his ship systems, preparing for whatever was coming next. The Pioneer had been a formidable ship in battle, but facing an entire fleet of Xantharians was a different story. Within moments, the bridge of the Pioneer was filled with chaos. The ship's alarm blared as incoming fire from the Xantharians rocked the ship. Brooks could see it on the screen, the once ally ships now targeting humanity's fleet. The Xantharians were moving quickly, systematically taking out one human ship after another. Their attacks were precise and deadly, showing no mercy. "We're being surrounded, Captain," Commander Catherine Foster, his second-in-command, shouted. "They're cutting us off from the rest of the fleet." Brooks could hardly believe what he was seeing. The Xantharians were not only attacking, but they were also preventing humanity's ships from escaping the battlefield. The Pioneer had no choice but to fight back. Brooks ordered his crew to fire back, but it was clear that the odds were against them. The Xantharian ships were faster and more maneuverable, and their weapons were far more advanced. "I don't understand," Foster said, shaking her head in disbelief. "Why would they do this?" Brooks didn't have an answer. All he knew was that the Xantharians had betrayed humanity, and they were going to pay the price for it. But it was too late for regrets. The battle was in full swing, and humanity had to survive. He gave the order to fire everything they had. The battle became a blur of flashing lights and deafening explosions. The Pioneer fired its laser cannons, hitting several Xantharian ships, but the enemy was relentless. Human ships were being destroyed one by one, and the situation was growing more desperate by the minute. Brooks knew he had to make a decision: fight to the bitter end or find a way to escape. "Captain," Barnes shouted from his station. "We've got a way out. The enemy fleet is pulling back a little. If we act quickly, we can make a run for it." Brooks didn't hesitate. "Set course for the nearest jump point. Get us out of here now." The Pioneer's engines roared to life as the ship sped toward the jump point. But just as they neared the threshold, a massive explosion rocked the ship, sending it spinning out of control. The blast had come from one of the Xantharian ships, and it had struck the Pioneer's engine room. The ship was crippled. "We've been hit. Power systems are failing," Foster shouted. "We're losing control." Brooks gritted his teeth as the Pioneer lurched, its engines sputtering and its shields flickering. They were sitting ducks, easy targets for the Xantharians, but Brooks wasn't about to give up. He grabbed the intercom and spoke to his crew. "Hold on." "We're not done yet," he shouted, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to survive this. We're going to make it home." With all their strength, the crew of the Pioneer fought to keep the ship in one piece. But despite their best efforts, the Xantharians were closing in. Brooks knew that if they didn't escape soon, they would all be doomed. Then, just as all hope seemed lost, another explosion tore through the enemy fleet. Brooks looked up in surprise. It wasn't the Pioneer that had fired. It was a group of human ships that had arrived, reinforcements sent from Earth. The sudden appearance of the reinforcements gave Brooks and his crew a much-needed break. The reinforcements, led by Captain Liam Evans aboard the Thunderstrike, engaged the Xantharians, pushing them back. Brooks saw the opportunity and ordered the Pioneer to limp toward the nearest jump point. With a final surge of power, the Pioneer jumped into hyperspace, narrowly escaping the battlefield. The Pioneer and its crew were safe, for now. But as the ship hurtled through space, Brooks couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. The Xantharians had been their friends, their allies. Now they were enemies, and the galaxy would never be the same again. As the crew gathered in the mess hall after the battle, the tension in the room was palpable. They had survived, but at a terrible cost. The Pioneer was badly damaged, and many lives had been lost in the battle. But the most important question remained. Why had the Xantharians turned on them? Brooks stared out the window, looking at the stars. He didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear. Humanity had to prepare for what was coming next. The galaxy had just changed, and humanity would need to be ready for whatever came next. The Pioneer drifted through space, the stars stretching into endless darkness outside. Inside the ship, the crew moved in silence, each one lost in their own thoughts. The recent battle had left its mark on them all. Some of the crew members had lost friends, while others had barely survived the fight. Captain Samuel Brooks stood alone in the observation room, looking out at the void. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The Xantharians had been their allies for years, and now they were their enemies. He still couldn't believe it. It didn't make sense. The Xantharians had always been a reliable and trusted race, helping humanity in the wars against the Gorians and other threats. But now they had betrayed humanity in the most brutal way possible. Brooks clenched his fists. He was a soldier trained to fight, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle between enemies. It was a betrayal by those who had once fought beside them. "Captain, we need to talk," said Commander Catherine Foster, stepping into the room. She had been with Brooks for years, a trusted officer. Her face was tired, but there was determination in her eyes. Brooks turned and nodded. "I know, this isn't over. We need answers." Foster looked down at the floor for a moment, thinking. "I know we all want answers, but we need to focus on survival first. We can't just go after them without knowing why they attacked us. We're outnumbered and outgunned. We need to be smart about this." Brooks knew she was right. As much as he wanted to chase down the Xantharians and make them pay, they had to be careful. The Pioneer was badly damaged, and their reinforcements, though helpful, couldn't stay forever. If they rushed into another battle without a plan, they might end up getting wiped out. "Do we have any leads?" Brooks asked. Foster hesitated. "We've been trying to contact the Xantharians, but they've cut off all communication. We've also sent out scouts to find any trace of them, but so far, nothing." Brooks crossed his arms. The silence in the room felt heavy. "We need to get to the bottom of this. I won't rest until I know why they turned on us. We trusted them, and now I need answers." Foster gave a small nod. "We'll find them, Captain, but we have to be careful. There's no telling what the Xantharians are planning now. They may have more allies than we realize." Brooks sighed and turned back to the window. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. The galaxy had changed, and humanity's role in it was now uncertain. But he had led men and women through difficult situations before. He could do it again. The next few days were tense. The crew worked around the clock to repair the Pioneer as much as possible. They had limited resources, but they had to make do. Brooks spent most of his time in the command center, studying reports and analyzing data from their recent battle. It was clear that the Xantharians had carefully planned their attack. They had waited for the right moment to strike, and they had done it with precision. The attack had been swift and brutal, and it left humanity's forces scattered and weakened. "I've been thinking about the attack," Foster said, breaking Brooks' thoughts. "I don't think it was a random act of aggression. The Xantharians had to have a reason." "But what could it be?" Brooks turned to face her. "That's what I don't understand. We've worked with them for years. We've shared information, fought side by side. There was no sign that they were planning anything like this." Foster nodded. "Exactly. It's almost as if someone pushed them into this. Maybe they were forced to turn against us." Brooks frowned. "Who would have the power to make the Xantharians turn on their allies? Who could manipulate them like this?" Foster's eyes narrowed. "Maybe it's not someone manipulating them. Maybe they just see humanity as a threat now. Maybe we've become too powerful, too influential. They could be worried about what humanity could do in the future." The idea made sense, but it didn't sit well with Brooks. "We've never shown any interest in dominating the galaxy. We just want to survive. We've always fought to protect ourselves, not to conquer others." "I know," Foster said softly, "but that might be how the Xantharians see it. They've been in power for so long, maybe they see humanity's rise as a threat to their own position." Brooks walked over to the ship's console, pulling up data on the Xantharians. "If they saw us as a threat, why didn't they act sooner? Why wait until now?" Foster's voice was steady. "Maybe they were waiting for the right moment, or maybe something happened that pushed them over the edge. We'll need to investigate further to find out." Brooks nodded. "I agree, but we need to be careful. We can't rush into this without a solid plan. The Xantharians may be more dangerous than we realize." The Pioneer continued its journey through space, its engines purring as the crew moved forward into the unknown. They had no clear direction now, no clear goal. The galaxy was in turmoil, and humanity's place in it was uncertain. But one thing was for sure: the Xantharians would have to answer for their betrayal. Brooks gathered his officers in the command center, laying out a plan. "We need to split up. Some of us will search for any remaining Xantharian ships, while others will try to contact any potential allies. We need to rebuild our forces and gather as much intelligence as possible. The Gorians could take advantage of this chaos if we don't act quickly." The crew nodded in agreement. They had no choice but to move forward. Brooks had always been a leader who believed in taking action, even when the odds were stacked against them. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever. As the days passed, the crew began to piece together a plan. They would send scouts to key locations, including planets where the Xantharians had a strong presence. They would also work to contact other species who might be sympathetic to humanity's cause. The galaxy was vast, and there were many unknowns, but Brooks knew that they couldn't give up. They couldn't let the Xantharians win. "We'll find them," Brooks said to his crew as they prepared for the next stage of their mission. "We'll find out what happened, and we'll make sure humanity is not left in the dark. We'll show the galaxy that we're not going down without a fight." The crew of the Pioneer knew that they were walking into dangerous territory. The Xantharians were no longer the allies they had once been. They were now enemies, and their betrayal had set off a chain of events that could change the fate of the galaxy. But Brooks and his crew were determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. They had survived the initial attack, but the battle for humanity's future had only just begun. And as the Pioneer sailed through the stars, Brooks couldn't help but wonder if the galaxy would ever be the same again. Captain Samuel Brooks sat in his chair on the bridge of the Pioneer, staring at the starry expanse outside. It was a quiet moment, but the silence was heavy. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The betrayal by the Xantharians had left him with more questions than answers. Why had they turned on humanity? What had pushed them to this point? And most importantly, what were they planning next? He looked up when Commander Catherine Foster entered the bridge, her face serious. "Captain, we've received some new information," she said, holding a data pad. Brooks leaned forward. "What is it?" Foster handed him the data pad. "Our scouts found something. A Xantharian fleet, smaller than the one that attacked us, but it's enough to raise some alarms. They're headed toward a system we thought was abandoned. It's called Galthar. Brooks quickly scanned the information. Galthar was a remote system, once a peaceful area for trading, but now abandoned after a devastating attack years ago. It didn't make sense. Why would the Zintharians go there? The Galthar system was far from the core of the galaxy. It wasn't a place anyone would want to settle, especially after the destruction it had seen. "We have to investigate," Brooks said, handing the pad back to Foster. "Prepare the crew, set course for Galthar. I want to know what they're up to." Foster nodded and left to give the orders. The Pioneer powered up its engines and began its journey toward the Galthar system. The crew worked in quiet determination, focused on their tasks. Brooks stood at the command center, watching the stars slip past the windows. He couldn't help but think about the Zintharians. What had happened to them? How had they gone from allies to enemies in such a short time? Was it fear or was it something else? As the Pioneer made its way toward Galthar, the tension among the crew grew. No one spoke much. The betrayal had shaken them all. Some members of the crew had family back on Earth, and they worried about what might happen if the Zintharians decided to go after their home planet. Others were simply afraid of what they might find when they arrived in Galthar. Brooks stood up, his thoughts racing. "Commander Foster," he called out as she passed by, "get me a status update on the fleet. I want to make sure we're ready for anything." Foster gave a quick nod. "Already on it, Captain." The crew continued to prepare as the ship moved closer to its destination. Brooks couldn't help but feel the weight of leadership on his shoulders. This mission wasn't just about finding out why the Zintharians had betrayed humanity. It was about the future of the galaxy. If they were to survive, humanity needed to rebuild its alliances, but that would only be possible if they understood what had happened with the Zintharians. The Pioneer entered the Galthar system several hours later, and the atmosphere on the bridge shifted. Brooks could see the nearby planets, their surfaces scarred by years of war and neglect. The Galthar system was a ghost of its former self, its planets empty and cold. The Zintharians had been known to operate in this area during the wars, but there had been no sign of activity for years. Now, something had brought them back. "Captain," Lieutenant George Barnes said from his station, "we're picking up energy signatures." "It's faint, but there's definitely something out there," Brooks nodded. "Lock on to the source. Let's see what they're hiding." The Pioneer moved closer to the source of the energy readings. As they neared, the ship's sensors picked up a large structure, a massive Zintharian warship, unlike anything Brooks had seen before. The ship was camouflaged against the barren planet behind it, hidden away in a forgotten corner of the system. It was huge, easily capable of carrying an entire fleet, and it looked brand new. There was no way the Zintharians had built something like this in secret without a purpose. Brooks turned to Foster. "We need to get closer. Prepare a small team for a boarding operation." Foster hesitated for only a moment. "Are you sure, Captain? It could be a trap." Brooks looked at her, his face serious. "I don't have a choice. If they're hiding something here, we need to find out what it is. Prepare the team. I'll go with them." The crew moved quickly, preparing for the boarding operation. Brooks, Foster, Barnes, and a few other officers suited up and boarded a smaller shuttle, making their way toward the hidden Zintharian ship. As they approached, Brooks couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The ship was too quiet, too still. It was almost as if the Zintharians were waiting for something, or someone. The shuttle docked with the massive warship. Brooks and his team exited, their footsteps echoing in the cold, dark halls of the Zintharian vessel. The ship was deserted, but Brooks knew that it wasn't empty. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something was about to happen. They moved carefully through the ship, their footsteps soft on the metallic floors. The ship's corridors were wide and empty, but the sense of danger grew with each step. It was clear that the Zintharians had been here recently. The air was thick with the smell of oil and metal, and the flickering lights cast long shadows along the walls. After what felt like hours, they reached the control room. Brooks signaled for the team to stop as he slowly approached the door. He could hear muffled voices inside, but they were speaking in Zintharian, a language he didn't understand. He motioned for his team to prepare, and they silently drew their weapons. Brooks opened the door and the team stepped inside. The room was dark, with only a few lights illuminating the control panels. A group of Zintharians stood at the far end of the room, huddled around a large holographic map. Brooks' heart skipped a beat when he saw who was standing among them. It was Commander Vrax, the leader of the Zintharians, but something about him had changed. His face was hardened, his eyes cold and distant. Brooks stepped forward. "Vrax," he said, his voice calm but firm. "What's going on? Why did you betray us?" Vrax turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "Betrayal," he repeated. "You think we betrayed you?" "No, Captain, we are doing what must be done. We are securing the future of the galaxy." Brooks' mind raced. "What do you mean by that?" Vrax's gaze flicked to the holographic map, and Brooks saw it for the first time. The map showed not just the Galthar system, but other systems where Zintharian forces were gathering. It was a military buildup, unlike anything Brooks had seen before. "We have seen the truth, Captain," Vrax said. "Humanity's rise is unstoppable, but it is also dangerous. You may think you are fighting for peace, but your growing power threatens the balance of the galaxy. We can no longer stand by while humanity claims its place in the stars. We will be the ones to ensure that peace is kept, even if it means fighting against those we once called allies." Brooks was stunned. This wasn't just about a betrayal, it was about control. The Zintharians had turned against humanity because they feared what humanity might become. They believed that humanity's growing influence was a threat to the established order of the galaxy. "So you're going to fight us?" Brooks asked, his voice steady. Vrax nodded. "We will do whatever it takes to preserve peace, even if that means eliminating those who cannot see the truth." Brooks felt a wave of anger rise within him. The Zintharians had betrayed them out of fear, out of a desire to maintain their power. But this wasn't the end. Humanity wouldn't back down, not now. He turned to his team. "Get ready," he said. "We're not leaving here empty-handed." Captain Samuel Brooks stood in the Zintharian warship's control room, his fists clenched in anger. The words Vrax had spoken echoed in his mind. Humanity's rise is unstoppable, but it is also dangerous. The Zintharians had turned against humanity out of fear. They believed humanity's growing power was a threat to the galaxy's balance, and they had chosen to act before they were forced to. Brooks couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Zintharians, once their trusted allies, now saw humanity as the enemy. They had gathered a massive fleet, hidden away in the Galthar system, and their plans were already in motion. Humanity had to stop them before it was too late. "We can't let them get away with this," Brooks said, turning to his team. "We need to stop Vrax and the Zintharians before they can execute their plan. If they're building up a fleet, we're looking at a war. And if we don't act now, it'll be humanity that's wiped out." Commander Catherine Foster stepped forward, her face serious. "Captain, we're outnumbered. The Zintharians are stronger than we are, and we don't have the firepower to take them on directly. We'll need to think strategically." Brooks nodded. "I know, we have to outsmart them. The Pioneer is damaged, but it's still our best ship. We can't take them head-on, but we can use hit-and-run tactics. We need to disrupt their plans, slow them down, and gather more allies." Foster nodded, understanding the plan. "We'll need to gather more intelligence. If we can find out where the Zintharians are sending their fleet, we can strike first and keep them on the defensive." Brooks turned to Lieutenant George Barnes. "Any luck with our communication systems? Can we contact the other fleets?" Barnes shook his head. "We're still blocked. The Zintharians have cut off all communications. We can't get through to anyone outside the system." Brooks' frustration grew. He knew time was running out. "Then we'll have to rely on ourselves. We'll hit their weak points and make them think we have more support than we actually do. We'll play their game, but we'll do it our way." The team quickly got to work preparing for their next move. Brooks knew they had to act fast. The Zintharians were already preparing for war, and if they didn't stop them now, it would be a disaster for humanity. He watched as the crew worked tirelessly, readying the Pioneer for battle. The ship's systems were strained, but they could still hold together long enough to complete their mission. "We're ready, Captain," Foster said, her voice firm. Brooks nodded. "Good, let's move out." The Pioneer fired up its engines and set course for the Zintharian fleet's last known position. The tension on board was palpable. The crew knew that this mission could be their last chance to stop the Zintharians. If they failed, the galaxy would change forever. As they approached the edge of the Galthar system, Brooks stood on the bridge, looking at the stars. He could feel the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. He was leading humanity into what could be the most important battle of their history. If they didn't win, humanity would no longer be in control of its own fate. The Zintharians would dominate the galaxy, and humanity would be forced to bow to their will. "We're approaching their fleet," Barnes reported. "It's much larger than we expected." There must be at least 50 ships. Brooks swallowed hard. He knew the odds were against them, but they couldn't give up now. Prepare for engagement. We'll hit them fast and hard, then retreat before they can regroup. The Pioneer dropped out of hyperspace and immediately went to full speed. The Zintharian fleet was spread out, but it was clear they were ready for a fight. The Zintharians' ships were formidable, their weapons powerful and their defenses almost impenetrable. But Brooks had something they didn't, humanity's resolve. Target their weakest ships, Brooks ordered. Hit them with everything we've got, then pull back. We can't afford to get into a prolonged battle. The Pioneer fired its weapons, sending powerful blasts into the nearest Zintharian ships. The explosions lit up the darkness of space as the Pioneer weaved in and out of the enemy's fire. The Zintharians retaliated quickly, but the Pioneer was faster. The crew fired off shots, hitting the Zintharians' shields and damaging their weapons. "Captain, they're targeting our engines," Foster shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Evasive maneuvers, get us out of here," Brooks ordered. The Pioneer twisted and turned, narrowly avoiding the Zintharians' deadly shots. The ship's engines roared, and Brooks felt the ship lurch as it accelerated into another evasive maneuver. They had managed to strike a few blows, but the Zintharians were relentless. "We've taken damage to the hull," Barnes reported. "We can't keep this up for much longer." Brooks gritted his teeth. They couldn't keep running forever. "Initiate emergency jump, take us out of here." The Pioneer's engines flared as they made the jump to hyperspace. The ship trembled as it entered the faster-than-light speed, escaping the Zintharian fleet by mere seconds. Brooks exhaled in relief, but he knew this was just a temporary victory. The Zintharians would regroup and come after them, and they couldn't afford to rest for long. "We're safe for now," Foster said, looking at the damage reports. "But we can't afford to wait. They'll be back." Brooks nodded. "I know. We need to find a way to destroy their fleet before they can finish what they started. We can't let them keep building up their forces." Barnes spoke up, his voice hesitant. "There's another option. If we can get close enough, we might be able to sabotage their weapons. It's risky, but if we can disable their fleet, they won't be able to attack us." Brooks thought about it for a moment. The idea was dangerous, but it was the only chance they had. "Do it! Prepare a team. We'll need to strike at their core." The crew worked quickly, preparing for the next phase of their mission. Brooks knew the risks, but he also knew that they had no other choice. They couldn't let the Zintharians destroy everything they had fought for. The Pioneer made its way back to the Zintharian fleet, moving in low to avoid detection. Brooks stood at the command center, watching the fleet in front of him. This time, they wouldn't be running. This time, they were going to fight for their future. The boarding team was ready, and the Pioneer moved into position. They would strike at the heart of the Zintharian fleet, disabling their weapons and crippling their defenses. It was a long shot, but it was their best hope. The team boarded the shuttle, heading toward the nearest Zintharian ship. The shuttle made its way into the heart of the enemy fleet, dodging enemy fire as they approached. The Zintharians were waiting for them, but Brooks knew that they couldn't let fear stop them. They had to act now. As they landed on the Zintharian ship, Brooks took a deep breath. He knew that the next few minutes would decide the fate of humanity. He motioned for his team to follow him. "We're not backing down," he said. "This is for humanity's future." With that, the team moved forward, ready to fight for their survival.